Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal podcast on this special unscheduled live. I am very pleased to be joined by Zolal Habibi. I didn't almost know pre-production, but we're going to figure it out. And the reason why, so this is normally a podcast recording, and normally we would just record the podcast and talk about the book or whatever it is and then move on quickly. But because today this is so prescient to what's going on in Tehran and throughout Iran right now, I have, with seconds of warning, let our guest know that we're going to be going straight live in addition to recording this. So we're going to find out all about this wonderful activist history and what she does and her thoughts together. Because again, I've only read the Podmatch profile. So welcome, Zolal, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you for having me, and I would like to greet everyone who's tuning in or watching this podcast today or afterwards. Thank you for having me.
Yes, no, thank you. And we've got a great group already. We have a dozen, which is great for 2:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. So, let's just dive right into, let us know a little bit about yourself and your activism. Let's get to know each other a little bit first.
Well, as you introduced, my name is Zolal, and I am an activist with the Iranian resistance movement, and I am a member of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, which is the parliament in exile, which has been concentrated on the overthrow of this regime since 1981. I joined the Iranian resistance at the age of 18, 19, and I have dedicated the most part of my life to the cause of freedom in Iran. I am from a generation that unfortunately has never had the opportunity to see Iran or be in Iran. My parents came to the US before the revolution, so I've never had the chance to go to Iran, but I can sincerely say that there hasn't been a day that I have not thought about the plight of the Iranian people and what they are going through. And so these days are very critical days. And we hope that finally, after all the bloodshed, after all the hardships, after all the sacrifices that have been made, we will finally be able to see a free, secular, democratic republic in Iran.
Yes, I've been sort of modestly aware of some of the resistance and in exile organizations, and so you've listed all of them so well, so thank you, because I was kind of vaguely aware they existed, didn't know names or people. We've now met names and people, their names and you as a people, so that's very exciting. Let's dive right into the question I think everyone has on their minds, and that is protests in Iran. We've heard this story before. I grew up, my dad was a Cold Warrior and left the right before the invasion of Kuwait to get rid of Saddam and whatnot, and he always maintained in his old military guy type of way, all Iran needs is one good solid protest and the whole country comes apart. And he told me that when I was like 12. That was 20, a long time ago. Never mind. Long time ago. And so from time to time we hear about protests. They usually get suppressed, all this type of thing. People get arrested, and the Ayatollahs seem to hang on to power. What makes these protests different, and why is everybody kind of hopeful that this is it for them, especially given the activism by the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi? So that's not how to pronounce his name, Cameron. Anyway, what makes these protests different?
What sets these protests apart from all the previous protests is actually the nature and the signature of these protests, I think. Um, First of all, let's go back a bit. These we see how the demonstrations in Iran are evolving, or the uprisings in Iran are evolving from year to year. If you go back in 1981, which was the first major um, protest and uprising against Khomeini at the time, after the 1979 revolution, was June 20th, 1981, when a spontaneous, peaceful protest of 500,000 people in Tehran supporting the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran was attacked. Khomeini ordered for its Revolutionary Guards and to actually open fire on the peaceful protesters. And that is when the resistance went underground in Iran. And it's been a continuous fight from June 20th, 1981 till today. But if you see, like, for instance, then there was the 1999 student uprisings, then 2009, then 2017, 19, 22, and now today. Each time it has evolved in its methods, in its growth, and how extensive it has been, and also in its slogans and in its demands. Today, the protest began with the economic situation in Iran, which the economic crisis, with the strike of the bazaar. You have to understand the importance of the bazaar. Iran's economy is based on the bazaar. The bazaar is, I guess, kind of like the Wall Street of Iran. And historically, it also plays an important role because the point when the bazaar joined the protests in 1979, 1978 was a turning point in the revolution in 1979 too. So it's always had a very important role, the bazaar. It was on the second day, the bazaar's strike was joined by students, and within days it started spreading, and now it has spread to all 31 provinces across Iran and in over about 200 cities. What is important, I think, is that immediately within the first hours, the slogans and the chants and the demands of the protesters was the overthrow of the regime, with slogans of down with Khomeini, down with the dictator, down with the oppressor, be it the Shah or the mullahs. Actually, what they're trying to emphasize is the fact that we want to move forward. So unfortunately, there's this narrative and scenario that you actually kind of pointed to it now too, so I'm going to explain it. There's this narrative and scenario that when it comes to Iran, there are two options on the table. When it comes to Iran, as in what is the solution, what needs to be done. One is they usually say, well, we're stuck between the appeasement policy and negotiation, diplomatic relations with Iran, or a firm policy, which unfortunately is translated into war or foreign intervention. And then it's like you have to choose between these two. Well, the message of the Iranian resistance for the past 20 years, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi actually stated this at the European Parliament 21 years ago almost. She stated that there is a third option on Iran. We're not stuck between choosing between war and appeasement. The third option is supporting the Iranian people and their organized resistance, because the Iranian people have the capability and the capacity to be able to create change. So that's on one hand. The other is people say, well, what are the people's choices for after the overthrow of the regime? What is presented is, well, you either have to, live with this current regime, or you have to go back to the previous dictatorship. Well, the message of the Iranian people is, no, we're not stuck between two dictatorships. We don't have to choose between bad and worse. We want to move forward into the 21st century with a secular democratic republic in Iran, where the ballot box is the final criterion, and where there's people's sovereignty instead of having to live under, a dictatorship and and its rule. So that is the message that's coming in from Iran. Unfortunately, there are different narratives that are being pushed, but it's not what the people of Iran are asking for. So the Iranian people, they believe that we have the capability and the capacity to create change. And this is something that has been seen. You have to understand the historic background. The Iranian people in the last 100 years, they have dealt with, unfortunately, like for instance, Reza Shah was brought in by the British. So it was imposed on the Iranian people. And then he was taken out. The US and MI6 brought in his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Then he was taken out. And then the West actually brought in Khomeini because they made that decision in Guadeloupe that it would be to their benefit because it was the Cold War then. USSR is bordering Iran from the north. And then, so if you have someone who's religious and anti-communism, it would be to our benefit because the revolutionary forces that actually created the revolution in 1979 were all still in prison or had been executed. And so there was this vacuum, and Khomeini came and filled that vacuum and really stole the revolution. So the people of Iran didn't revolt in 1979 to end the monarchy in Iran, to bring in a religious dictatorship. Unfortunately, their revolution was stolen. So now people feel like this is our chance, this is our turn to be able to actually bring about a true democracy in Iran, a democratic republic in Iran. And unfortunately, we are in the days of that for many are a reminder of the 1979 revolution, because the 1979 revolution was happening during these months. It took place in the end of the monarchy, and the victory of the revolution was on February 10th, but February 11th actually. And so right now we are in those days. The last set of political prisoners had been released on January 20th that year. So there's a lot of, that resemblance, and that's something that Iranians, it means a great deal to them. So right now the message on the ground is we want to see the overthrow of this regime. They are asking for international help, and that means first, recognize our right to resist and to fight back with the mullahs. Two is blacklist the IRGC. The US has done that, but like Europe, UK, they have not. So that is what they're requesting, because the IRGC is the force that is being funded and it's suppressing the people on the ground. The third is to hold the regime accountable for its crimes against humanity and its war crimes that it's committing right now on the streets in Iran. And so these are the basic demands of the Iranian people. They do want help, so help would be, but help doesn't necessarily mean troops on the ground. It means provide internet connection for people to have communication methods. The reality is, unfortunately, today is day 5 of the internet shutdown in Iran. And unfortunately, it has come at a very, very high cost, with thousands and thousands of people who have died. Unfortunately, communication is very limited. So it's very hard to verify the exact numbers, but it's a massacre what is happening right now in the streets. We are seeing the images that the regime itself is publishing of bodies on the ground and asking their families to come and identify them. Why does the regime do that? They want to spread fear in society. This is something that we've seen, as I said, in 1981. In 1981, the regime used to print in its newspapers, would the parents of these children come and identify their bodies, because we don't even know their names and they've been executed. And they would have like a newspaper with pictures of all these children who've been executed, teenagers. There's a famous newspaper article that cut out actually. It's from 1981. It's from a French newspaper. It says 200 children executed overnight in Iran. And back then, every single day, the newspaper would print like a whole list of names of people who had been executed that day. And that is how Khomeini was able to create fear in society and be able to keep control over society. I unfortunately know a lot of families who they still remember in the newspaper Kehan or Etelat that they opened what day it was on what page, number like 76, number 52 was the name of my brother, my mother, my sister who was executed. And this is something that just stays with you. And so that's how the regime spread fear. And now they're trying to do that again because they have that experience. And unfortunately, we also saw over the summer in July, the reality is that the Iranian regime has known for a while that if an uprising starts in Iran, ignites in Iran again, this time it's going to be for the overthrow of the regime, and it's going to be very difficult for the regime to control the scenario and the narrative on the ground. In July, there was an article in Fars news agency, which belongs to the Revolutionary Guards, stating that we need to repeat the experience that we have from the 1988 massacre. In 1988, in the summer of 1988, the Iranian regime executed 30,000 people in 5-6 weeks, right after the end of the Iran-Iraq war. Because with the Iran-Iraq war for 8 years, Khomeini was able to suppress any kind of dissent internally, saying that if you say anything opposing me, that means you're with the enemy. And when that war ended, which was a devastating war, over 1 million people had been killed. 450,000 children were sent to wipe out the minefields. So it was, you could just understand the country was in destruction and people were fed up with the regime, and Khomeini knew that. So what did he do? That week that the war ended, he had the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners. And with that, every family in Iran had either lost someone or they knew someone who had been killed. And with that, they were able to keep people silenced for another decade. So right now, the regime is trying to use the same tactics, but the difference is that today, the people of Iran have learned from those experiences. They know that no one's going to hand us freedom in a silver platter. We have to pay a price for it. And unfortunately, that price is going to be high, but sitting behind or standing behind to safeguard your own life is not going to get you anywhere, because a lot of the youth in Iran right now are saying, we might be alive, we might be breathing, but this is not a life that we have. And so they want to see a change and they want to see this regime overthrown. And that's the inspiration and the ambition that we're seeing in Iran's Gen Z, who bravely are standing. And I think one of the main characteristics of this uprising is that nature. They're on the offensive now. They are disarming the security forces. They are targeting centers of suppression. And they're very united on the streets. They help one another. They stand together, and they protect one another. And I think that unity is something that's unprecedented. And I think one of the other elements is the fact that you see organizational structure in these uprisings. Where does that come from? About 12 years ago, 13 years ago almost, the Iranian resistance announced a strategy. And that was the strategy of creating resistance units throughout Iran. The message was, those who are on the ground and they're local, they have an understanding of the city, they know who they can trust, form units, come together, organize together, and start, your activities against the regime. It started with writing, slogans on the wall, or keeping hope alive, keeping the hope alive, and targeting the Iranian regime, revealing the nature of the Iranian regime. And this has increased to a point that last year we had about the activities of the resistance units in the last year, so in the Persian year, which we're kind of at the end of it now, but in 2024 practically, we had over 40,000 activities carried out by resistance units throughout Iran, and they also targeted over 3,000 centers of oppression. That acted as an example for for society. And so that's why when these protests broke out this time, everyone in a way knew what they were supposed to do because they've been seeing it on the streets every single day throughout Iran. So they knew what the chants were, they knew what their slogans were, they knew what their demands were, and they knew what they need to target and what they need to concentrate on. And so that I think is something that's unprecedented. And we saw, like, for instance, last week, in the province of Elam, even though it was the first province that the regime really cracked down on, the Iranian regime attacked the hospital, which is a war crime. But despite that, the people there were able to come together, organize, and we saw that in one night, two adjacent towns were liberated by the people. They were able to push out all the suppressive forces with their unity, with their organizational structure that they had created. So that is a new phenomenon that we're seeing on the ground right now in Iran, and that is what sets it apart from all the previous demonstrations. And I think that's what the regime fears the most, because the Iranian regime knows that because of Iran's geography, at the end of the day, the only thing that can really overthrow it is the people in masses. And for these people to turn to really these rebellious youth to turn to like the liberation army of Iran. And that is what it fears the most, because at the end of the day, because of Iran's geography and how extensive it is, troops on the ground or some kind of attack is not really going to lead to the overthrow of the regime. In fact, since it can't do that, the regime knows that this is key for them. That's why they've cut off the internet now, to be able to suppress with open hands, kill with open hands on the streets, because there's no one documenting it in a way. But we are receiving a lot of videos, footage coming in very trickled through very difficult means, but we are receiving reports on daily basis. It might be with 1 day delay, but we are receiving the reports. And the one message that people are trying to give, especially in the last 24 hours, that phone lines in certain areas have been restored. We have been able to actually get this message. The only message they're trying to send out is that we are continuing. We have not stopped despite the bloodshed. And they want to give that message to the international community that we're still standing, we're still fighting. So please don't turn your eyes away from Iran. Concentrate on Iran and help us so we can create change.
Well, take a breath. I had a whole bunch of questions, and you've answered
Sorry.
all of them. But let's just take a breath. Let's process all that together, shall we, everyone? Oh my goodness, this is yes, this is very very exciting and highly organized, and there's a lot going on there. I always laugh about, as an American with an American perspective, and someone who has a master's degree in international relations and studied asymmetrical warfare and terrorism, and has spent probably more time than most people studying Iran-Iraq war and the revolution, all this type of thing. I always laugh about our country's issue with Iran when I'm kind of like, we did this to ourselves. We're the idiots that got rid of Mossadegh. Thank you, Kermit Roosevelt. I'm like, this is a self-wound. We shot our own selves in the foot and sent them the bill. Like, it's,
yeah, that's one of the
yes.
reasons the Iranian people are very, I mean, the Iranian people, that's one of the reasons they say we need to be able to create that change ourselves, because we have the experience of Mossadegh. Dr. Mossadegh was the only democratic government Iran ever had, somewhat democratic at least.
Yes.
And just because he nationalized oil, he wasn't to the benefit of, unfortunately, Western powers. And so he was overthrown. And look where we are today. So that is the issue.
It's honestly such a huge self-own. I know, because I follow a lot of, so let me just say, first of all, I'm very sad about the situation in Iran, because I don't know why, but for some reason, I have an affinity for this. Sounds so woo woo and dumb, but I have like a weird affinity. I've always wanted to go and check out Tehran, and I've always wanted to go and experience this sort of. I mean, it's one of the oldest civilizations in the world. It's like going to China, sort of thing. So I've always had a very particular affinity for that place. And I always kind of secretly hope one day a better government will come in and I'll get to cruise on over. Um, and
That's always been my dream too, because as I said, I've never had the chance to actually go to Iran, but my family comes from Shiraz, which is like supposed to be this paradise that
yes.
unfortunately we've never had the chance to see. I remember from like childhood, that was like my wish on every birthday cake. My dad used to tell me we'll be in Iran in 6 months, and then my wish was in Iran, in a free Iran next year. But I think 2026 maybe is the final year that we will be able to make that dream come true.
No, absolutely. I've always wanted to go. I've always wanted to check it out. I years ago, I do developmental editing for books, and among all of this, and years and years ago, I had edited a book for this man who was living in Germany, and it was about his childhood and escape from Iran and his experience in prison. He'd gotten arrested for soliciting prostitution. And I enjoyed a lot about that book, including the way he described this very classy sort of, you go to this lovely house where these ladies live, sort of. It was all, I'm kind of like very civilized. I enjoyed it, sort of thing. And I'd enjoyed that, and I'm just kind of like, I want to go to all these places. I don't need to necessarily be visiting the process or anything. I just want to go and see the architecture and meet people. One of my favorite actresses, Sheree Agadashlu, is Iranian, and I've read all of her memoirs. There are two of them. I've read them both. So I've been stuck on this country for a while. It's a very weird thing. But I do have kind of a bit of an odd question. I know it's a bit of a sticky point. I know that the Shah is not popular for a lot of reasons. The man used to have his lunch sent in by Concord. The people were starving. Like, I understand, like, there's a reason no one was sad to see him go. Not that I'm advocating for this, but is that in all the institutions that you have in your in your diaspora, is there any opportunity to leverage him now, like his son obviously, but his son, that institution, is there any way to leverage that as part of a transition stability, maybe take a page out of Britain's book, Constitutional Monarchy. You get to stand and wave flags. You're here to look good. Other people will deal with the governing, sort of thing. Like, is there any opportunity for that, or do we just need to be entirely rid of that conversation altogether and just move on to Republican, small R Republican, small D democracy? So.
Well, actually, I think it's a really good question to ask, and it's necessary one to answer. So I'll be more than happy to answer this one because
I was
this
just
is something
putting it
that
out
comes
there.
from
It
the
may
heart.
be helpful. I know
No, no,
nothing,
I
so
think it's
yeah.
a very important question to ask. So this is the thing. Uh, the Iranian people had a revolution for a reason. It wasn't only the poverty, which same situation now. I mean,
Right.
the times are different, but back then people were suffering from poverty too. And back then people were suffering from this class difference that you saw in society. But that wasn't the only factor. One of the main factors was also the Savak,
Mm.
his
The secret
executions,
police.
the
Yes, yes, yes.
tortures.
Right.
Yeah. I was looking at a report from Amnesty International back in 1978. Iran was the number one country in executions. Today, Iran is number one country in execution. So during the Shah's time and the Mullah's time, unfortunately, they've held the record in this area. The level is not comparable, but things have also changed. So, I mean, the reality is that both were a dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one, we always say that unfortunately for the people of Iran, a regime came into power which was so brutal that it kind of whitewashed the crimes of the Shah, but it doesn't wash it away. Those happened. That was the
Those are
reality
still
of life.
grieving families. Some people lost family
I know
members under
people
the
who
Shah.
still have the scars of torture on their bodies. Aziz Rezai, she's an 82-year-old woman who three of her sons and one daughter was killed by the Shah. Her son was dubbed the Rose of the Revolution because he was this young guy who, when he was executed, he was 19. When he was arrested, he was 16. And to this day, when you hear, he was the only one who had actually a public trial because the regime thought they had bribed him into coming in, admitting that he was wrong or whatnot. And so he played them, and so there was an international reporter there, and so that's the one court case that you still actually have the audio and pictures of. And the reality is she still has the scars of torture. Why was she in prison? Only because of her children. She was imprisoned too, and she was tortured severely by the Savak. So these are things that the people of Iran haven't forgotten. Time does not wash away things or make you forget the realities of what happened during the Shah. The people had the pain that they came to the streets. It wasn't just because, we had it good and so let's take to the streets. That's not how it works. So there's that past, but you should judge each person by their own records and not like their family. Even though he is promoting a monarchy, which would be hereditary, but anyway, let's even put that aside. Right. What has he done for the people of Iran in the last 47 years? Nothing whatsoever. He has not held a job for one day. He has not been able to form one organization that lasts more than 6 months. He has no, how is he going to rule a country, even if he means that I'm just going to be a figure? And to be honest, we've heard that before from Khomeini. Khomeini said, well, when I go to Iran, I don't want to be in politics. I'm going to go to Qom and I'm going to continue my religious studies. So that doesn't fool the people of Iran anymore. Right. But the reality is that, unfortunately, so the issue right now is not rivalry for us as the Iranian opposition. If he had the capability to create change and overthrow this regime, we would say, hats off to you. Please go ahead. We'll support you if needed. But that's not the reality, and that's not what he's doing. In fact, he's trying to hijack an uprising, and that's just wrong. But aside from that,
I also heard from someone who has met him and spoken with him extensively that we'll try to have on the show here soon. And they said, because I asked this person about this, and he said, really nice guy, no teeth, no ability to rule this country in any meaningful way, sort of thing. And I was kind of like,
I've heard that from someone too.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, oh, well, okay, that kind of makes sense. I guess my thought was just kind of like, sometimes it's nice to have a figure, a touchstone person as a stabilization for us, but it sounds like he's wholly useless. So we'll just proceed on with the democracy conversation.
But I think there's two more factors that maybe it's because I think a lot of people who are viewing this, they might have that question because this is something that is being presented. Especially in social media and some media outlets, because there are interest groups behind it. But the one thing is that for the first time after 47 years, he has given a roadmap, something he put together. It's about 170 pages. It's available in English and Farsi. People can read it. It's supposed to be his plan for the future. If you look at it, he says, we are going to revive the Savak, but the Savak is going to be responding to him directly. And like, for instance, I mean, the things that he's said in this, it's really, if you read it, it's like the blueprint for a dictatorship worse than his dad's. Because even his dad had certain checks and balances in place to some extent, even if they were just for show, but they existed. This doesn't exist. And he says that we're going to have, for about 20 months, we're going to have a police state. So like, for instance, there's going to be curfews in all major cities in Iran, this and that, to be able to make sure that he can control things. And I mean, if you read through it, it's really mind-boggling to see it. And
it seems so out of step. I've heard nothing but what you've said, and it sounds completely out of step with the way things are on the ground as you've also described it.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, like, for instance, one of the main things that people have been asking him, especially after 2022, this issue has come up more and more after 2022 and the uprisings, and that, like, how do you plan on, because I mean, you can't, as an individual, fine, you go there, what are you going to run the country with? He keeps on saying that I rely on the same forces that are in the military now, in the suppressive forces now. And he just says, like, I have connections with people in the IRGC, I have connections with people in Basij. So he wants to recycle those suppressive forces to become his forces. And that's exactly what Khomeini did after his father, because
Right.
those who were most of the people who worked in Savak, like aside from the heads of Savak, like Pavis Savati, who came to the US, the rest of them, the name was just changed from Savak to Vevak, but it's still the same people and the same methods, the same prison, the same tortures.
A
So,
nice man came around and changed all the signs, sort of
yeah,
thing. They even
exactly.
saved the end, just put up the new letters, sort of thing. Like, oh yes, we're this now, and get moving. Yes,
Yeah. And
yeah,
so this is like an issue for people, everyone. They're like, okay, you know, we are not ones like, for instance, the Iranian resistance. On the other hand, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi, first of all, the thing is that an alternative actually exists, and that's what's key. And an alternative that's not on paper, but in practice. I mean, it has the papers too. Like, for instance, the NCRI has a complete book about the interim government, how it's going to be for 6 months, then how there's going to be a assembly formed to put together the constitution, and then there's going to be free elections. This is how it's going to proceed. This is how it's going to be. And for the interim government, when you look at the plans put in place, it's not, as I said, it's not just words or written on paper. We've seen it in practice. The National Council of Resistance of Iran was formed July 1981. So since July 1981, people have seen its actions and that it stands by its values and principles. And that has been key. It hasn't always been their decisions. Maybe like it wasn't popular in that day, but and over time, everyone realized that they made the right decision then. Like, for
and see,
instance,
that's the organizations he should be partnering with. If Reza Pahlavi is serious about this, they should be
yeah,
going to that to be
if
kind
you,
of like, let's to work with all that and become part of those plans and adopt those, rather than trying to be like, well, let's just roll the clock back to like February 1st, 1979, and just proceed on as if the last 50 years haven't happened. Yeah, buddy, that's not gonna work. That It's 2026. Check a calendar, buddy. Like,
like, for
it's
instance,
times have changed.
yeah, the importance of the National Council of Resistance of Iran is from the day it was formed, it has set like three criterions.
Mm.
And they said anyone who agrees with these, you're welcome to join. So they've created like a coalition. There are different ethnic groups, different ethnicities, different religions, different political views represented in this council. And everyone has an equal vote. So it's not like if you're from the larger organization, you're going to have a stronger vote than the person that maybe their group is just one or two people. It doesn't work that way. So it has 500 members, and 52% of which are women, which is very important.
Yes.
The president elect of the National Council of Resistance of Iran for the interim government is a woman, Mariam Rajavi. And she has a 10-point plan for the future of Iran. The 10-point plan kind of acts as I guess it's the summary of that, all the plans of the NCRI for the future of Iran. But it also serves as like a roadmap. People call it, many lawmakers have called it Jeffersonian. It's like, for instance, number one is to have the ballot box be the final criterion for there to be like people's sovereignty in Iran. The second is, like, for instance, it's abolition of the death penalty and all forms of execution and torture, and abolition of all the suppressive forces and entities, because right now in Iran there are many of them, and so that's really important for people inside of Iran. One of the other things is in regards to women's equality and actually empowerment of women, which is one of the key platforms of Mrs. Rajavi. She has really, she's a trailblazer when it comes to women's rights. And uh, because, like, for instance, the entire leadership council of the MEK, which is like the main part organization member of the NCRI, are all women. She believes in women's empowerment because she believes that through women's empowerment and having women present in leadership, we can break those misogynist uh, structures in society. And it's really emancipating both for men and women. And because women have been suppressed systematically in Iran for so long, just imagine when that pressure is taken off, they have so much potential to jump.
My
So
favorite protest was the men going around wearing headscarves to protest their mandatory wearing. I thought that was the best thing ever.
yeah,
To
I
turn the
remember
whole
that for sure. Yeah,
system on its head. No, I don't mean to be disrespectful because you're wearing a
then
headscarf. I'm just that protest was, I thought, quite clever.
yeah.
Sort of thing. That was excellent. That was excellent.
One of
But
the
yeah, I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry, just the 10-point really quick. One
Mhm.
of the other points is like freedom of speech, freedom of political parties, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press and the internet, what we lack today. Commitment to individual and social freedoms and rights in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As I said, separation of church, religion, and state, and freedom of all religions and faiths, and those who might not have a faith, to respect their rights. Complete gender equality, as I mentioned, in all the realms, be it political, social, cultural, economic, an independent judiciary and legal system, recognizing the autonomy for and the removal of all the double injustices against Iranian nationalities and ethnicities. Um, Justice and equal opportunities in the realm of employment and entrepreneurship for all people of Iran in a free market society, protection and rehabilitation of the environment, and a non-nuclear Iran, which I think all of them are really important and are key, but these are like some of the main points that are in the 10-point plan. So it's one thing to say we just want to overthrow the regime, but it's another that the Iranian people know that um, that exists, that structure exists, this organized resistance exists, and there are people who have dedicated decades of their lives to freedom in Iran. I think that one of the most important things that this resistance has done is regain people's trust with the price that they've paid themselves. Like, for instance, I know people who were maybe in their late teens, early 20s when they joined this resistance, and they have, for the last 47 years, they've been fighting this regime without one day of attending to other issues. So they've dedicated their lives to the cause for freedom. And that kind of dedication shows that, if they were after power, if they were after money, if they were after anything else except the freedom of the Iranian people, they would not be standing in this resistance today. And I think that is what gives people hope on the streets. And that is what helps them continue on. And the fact that I think a lot of us, we are from the generations that have paid the price for freedom in Iran. Like, for instance, myself, as I said, I've never been to Iran, unfortunately, but my father was killed by the regime when I was 7. In 1988, that summer, the Iranian regime had 30,000 people executed. And but I always considered myself to be one of the lucky ones, despite that, because I knew so many others who had it so much worse than we did. I knew people who have had 14 members of their family executed. I've known people who had to witness. I had a friend who, at the age of 5, she was forced to watch her father be tortured. And unfortunately, her father ended up dying under torture. And so to this day, that lives on in her memories, even though she had tried to block it out. But she still had nightmares about it. And so these are the realities that the people of Iran have had to deal with. And So it has come at a very grave price, but we all understand that this is the price that we have to pay to finally be able to see freedom and democracy flourish in Iran. And we hope that that day will be soon. Unfortunately, right before joining your podcast, a friend of mine who lives in Austria just got the news that one of his friends, like school childhood friends, um, was killed in the demonstrations. And this is what our people are dealing with on day-to-day basis today. Last week we saw a woman who her 17-year-old son and 20-year-old son both were killed in one day, but still that family stood steadfast and they said, we're going to continue in the protest and we're going to continue because that's what our children wanted. They wanted to see Iran to be free. And a lot of the people who are going to the streets every day, every night when they go, they say their final farewells with their family because they know the risk of taking to the streets, but they know that this is the price that we have to pay collectively. So I think that kind of dedication and that kind of sacrifice is what's going to create that final change in Iran. And we hope to be able to invite you to a free Iran very soon.
Yes, I that's the part I'm looking forward to the most. Is yeah, walking off a plane and hopefully immediately into air conditioning unless it's winter. Um in Tehran and being able to see and experience everything. And yeah, it's we're getting towards the end of the show, and I'm gonna give my voice a break because I have another live show at 4 o'clock. But um I'm gonna ask you for your socials and all that sort of thing in a minute, but yeah, let's just keep our fingers crossed that perhaps the next time we speak, it'll be over some lovely espresso in a quiet cafe in a lovely neighborhood in a some place great in your family's country, in your country.
And
So
maybe a Persian tea.
yes,
That's
absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, this is the part of the show where we do plugs. So let us know where we can find you online and keep up with your work.
well on I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. My X and Instagram handle is Ashrafi forever. So it's ASHRAFI, the number four ever. And on LinkedIn under my own name, Zolal Habibi. You can learn more about the Iranian resistance and what it stands for and Mariam Rajavi on mariamrajaviforchange.com. Also, the NCRI, it's ncr-iran.org. And you could follow them also on their socials for the latest updates on the uprisings. There's also a account on X. It's English. Sorry, no, it's Mojahedin, Mojahedin, which has the latest reports from Iran. But on Instagram, you could also visit like Iran uprisings with a S at the end. They have updates daily, like 20, 30 times that you can follow the latest on the protest in Iran.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Zolal, so much for for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. I'm going to end the live here, but don't leave the Zoom yet. I'm going to come talk to you. We'll chat a little bit afterwards. But I'm going to end the live here for everyone now. Thank you all so much for coming by. We had multiple likes, multiple hearts. We've had this is more popular than the news hour. You've done very well for 2 o'clock on the afternoon on a Wednesday. This is more popular than the news hour on Monday nights. But thank you everyone so much for coming and seeing the special edition of the podcast. If you want to rewatch it, share it with your friends. Give me a couple hours and it will be re-uploaded on YouTube. But thank you so much, Zola, for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you very much for having me and wish everyone a beautiful day.